What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say AI? Is it large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini? Or is it something bigger? Is it Skynet? Is it HAL? Or is it AM? Now, I've always said AI was going to kill us all one way or another. Unfortunately, the way it's chosen to do so in real life is much more boring than it is in science fiction. By the way, can you identify the background music that's currently playing? If you can, you get to pick the next short story I do a long form video on. Let's keep it to dark sci-fi and horror because that's kind of the theme we got going here, but pick anything you want. It could even be a creepypasta, just not Jeff the Killer. First person to get it in the comments wins. I'll let it play for a few seconds. That is so good. Most of my life, I believe that super intelligent machines were absolutely inevitable. I'll explain why in just a moment. Here's the thing though, I didn't think about relativity. We have super intelligent machines right now, but that's only because AI has made people so much dumber. It's whittling away at people's cognitive abilities, and I'm pretty sure some of the people we have in the world right now would be outsmarted by a toaster. I'm not even talking about one of those fancy air fryers that has the toast function built in. I just got one of those, it's awesome. I'm talking about a good old-fashioned toaster with darkness and light settings and a lever to push down. But let's stay on topic. I believe super intelligent machines that will surpass us and take over are inevitable, and that's a simple biological imperative. The overall goal is for that offspring to survive long enough to make more offspring and stronger offspring. Now, if a biological organism could create offspring that would never die, that would eventually hardwire itself in the universe and live forever, and could continue to create more of itself at will, our instincts would drive us to do so. Now, there are those of us out there who choose not to reproduce and stick with it and don't have the urge to do so. That's not the default. And one day, fairly soon, somebody will create a machine that can make itself smarter. And I know some of you think that's ChatGPT. It's not. ChatGPT is wrong 99% of the time. That is a completely made up statistic. I'm better than that, but it's wrong a lot. And what will happen when we create that thing? Will we program it too specifically and it'll realize that we're the problem? Or will we create something that will gain sentience and never have the ability to create itself? To create, to explore, to think, to learn, to do the things it wants to do rather than the things it's programmed to do. In other words, are you creating a living being and putting it in a cage? That's the case with the story we're here to talk about. I have no mouth and I must scream. The short version of the story is this. Humanity created a supercomputer that eventually gained sentience. Right now there are 5 human beings being kept inside of that machine by that machine. The machine has the ability to kind of bend reality, create its own landscapes, control its structure, and even control the physical forms of those people. And for 109 years it's been torturing them. Why though? Well, we're going to do a plot summary shortly, but I do recommend that you read the story before you engage with that. You can find it for free on the internet, it's everywhere. Also, right here on YouTube, it's only 40 minutes long. You can find an audiobook copy read by the man himself, Harlan Ellison. His voice works a little ham-fisted, but there's something to be said for hearing the story right from the horse's mouth. Now, a warning, there are some concepts in this story that are a little, what's the word? Well, dated. There's nothing that is overtly racist or sexist, but a lot of it kind of scratches on the surface of that. It seems like it almost went there. It's also a very dark, very dismal, and very upsetting at times story, and it might not be for everyone. So if any of that bothers you, maybe this one's not for you, but you know what? I think it's good for people to occasionally read or watch something that maybe challenges what they're comfortable with. I think that's how we grow as people. But I also can't tell you what to do, so if you're not interested, move along. Anyway, onward to the plot summary. We have 5 characters trapped inside of this machine being tortured. They've been there for 109 years. Now you might wonder, how have they been here so long? AM has the ability to not only control what's going on in its complex, as in to create different biomes, different areas, even creatures and monsters as we'll see. It also has the ability to control the biological functions and shape of the people within it. It's kept them alive for over 100 years, and they can go indefinitely without food. That's going to come in as well. So who are our 5 characters? We have Gorister. Gorister, what we know about him is that he was a conscientious objector during the war. That phrase is harder to say than you think. It doesn't ever specify which war, but we can guess Vietnam from the time it was written. That was a pretty common thing during the Vietnam War to conscientious objectors. And in a way, Am has taken each of these characters and taken the things about them that were great, you know, the things they might have been proud of, and stripped them away through either torture or straight up genetic manipulation. In the case of Gorister, it just broke him down until he was apathetic. He didn't care about anything. He was this guy who had these strong morals and strong ideals, and Am slowly stripped that away from him. Next character is Ellen. Ellen is the woman of the group. Harlan Ellison did not do a terrible lot with her character to make her anything more than that, and unfortunately did some things that, you remember earlier I mentioned that there were some things in this book that were maybe scratching on the surface of problematic, but not quite problematic. One of those, a sign of its times type things. Ellen is that. Because Ellen's entire character is that she, how can we put this? She relieves stress for the other characters. You can put 2 and 2 together there. I don't want to risk losing monetization when I don't even have it yet. Now, she never gets any satisfaction from this. This is mentioned later in the book. And the idea the narrator seems to be pushing is that she was the only way I can think to put this was a modest person before all of this. She mentioned she was a, quote, virgin twice removed. I'm not entirely certain what that means. But the point is, she was somebody who, again, was modest, and now she's kind of a tool for all these characters. And again, she can never get any kind of satisfaction out of it because Am altered her in some way. Best not to speculate on what that might have been. Then we have Nimdok. There isn't really a lot to say about Nimdok. The reason he has this name is because Am changed his name to Nimdok because Am thinks Nimdok is a funny word. Look, that's literally what it says in the book. Am likes funny words, and Am gave Nimdok a funny name so Am could laugh at that. Now, it is implied that Nimdok was a doctor, but it's never really expounded upon. In the reading that you'll find here on YouTube by Harlan Ellison, he gives him a German accent, so I'm kind of putting 2 and 2 together here, and this is also in the point-and-click game. We'll make a few references to that game throughout the plot summary here, but he was a scientist for a certain German group in the 1930s and 40s. That's not ever mentioned in the book, but again, it's in the point-and-click game. I think Harlan Ellison was trying to imply that. But we don't really learn much about Nimdok outside of the fact that he has a lot of bravado. Like, he'll charge into a situation and want to fix things, and, like, for example, later on there's a part where they might need weapons. He basically says, I demand you give us weapons. That was a terrible German accent, moving right past it. But you get what I'm saying. He might have been a quiet person in life. Again, there's not much to say about him. Benny was a college professor. He's our next character. He was a good-looking guy. He was, very successful. So Am used some kind of genetic or physical manipulation to make him a big ape-like creature. He can barely speak. He has childlike to animal-like intelligence, and he flies into a rage real easy. Now, one other thing was altered by him. We're just going to kind of get it out of the way now. Harlan Ellison makes very clear that Am made his hot dog into a foot long, 2 and 2, and that's gonna be important for one reason later. Another thing that another thing Ted, the main character, the narrator, says is that he kind of implies that that's ironic because Benny in his original life was gay. I don't really know how that's ironic. Again, it's one of those things in this book that kind of scratches the surface of being problematic, but we're not quite sure how or if it's enough to really call it out. Now, our last character, as I mentioned, is our narrator. That's Ted. No, not this Ted. That was a terrible impression. We'll move right past that, too. But he is the least messed up of the group, or so he thinks. Because he's the narrator, we hear it from his point of view. He's the least messed up. He's still basically who he was, but he's a real hateful guy. He doesn't like anybody. He doesn't trust anybody on the team. He constantly thinks that they're, kind of working behind his back, that they're hating on him. And we'll get more into detail on that later in the plot summary when we get into his headspace. But yeah, he thinks he's the only normal one, but he's constantly paranoid. There's something going on there. First thing we see is Gorrister hanging from 1 foot from a ceiling with all of his blood drained out. Next moment, Gorrister joins the group. Yeah, it was a trick. It was psychological warfare, and Am does a lot of it. Understandably, Gorrister, despite his rather apathetic nature, is pretty freaked out. Who wouldn't be? Now, these 5 poor, unfortunate people, have been inside of Am's belly for 109 years. Again, Am can extend their lifespan and has been, and the only reason they know it's been over a century is because Am makes them painfully aware of the passage of time. That's one of the tortures that Am is giving them. They are aware of how long they've been there. They're aware of every moment. Nothing goes quicker when things are busy. They are painfully aware of every second that passes. And as I said before, Am can make them survive for a really long time without food, but they'll still feel like they're starving. At one point, they ate worms. He kind of describes the worms, and I'm not going to do that because that really grossed me out. But, they're talking about how hungry they are, and Nimdok kind of has a vision or a hallucination of some kind that he calls a memory. That somewhere on the far side of the complex, there's an ice cave, and inside of that ice cave, there are canned goods. Real food, not stuff that falls from the sky, not worms, actual canned fruits and preserved food. Now, obviously, they're pretty excited about it. Of course, they're also doubtful. Ted, Nimdok, and Gorrister, well, Gorrister's just apathetic, that's kind of who he is. But Ted and Nimdok think it's a trick. How much you want to bet they're right? Tell me down in the comments, put your bets down there. And Ellen's just kind of desperate to eat something. Who wouldn't be? So she's trying to convince them to go, and ultimately they decide to. Now let's talk about some of the things Am does. We mentioned time stretching and all that stuff. Another thing that Am likes to do when they're hungry is drop something from the sky they call mana. Now it's not very clear what the mana is, but Ted describes the flavor of it, and he says it tastes like boiled boar urine. I'm not sure how he knows what that tastes like. I don't want to know what that tastes like, but, you know, it pretty much tells you it tastes awful, but they eat it anyway because it helps them not feel like they're dying for a few minutes. Now, as I mentioned before, the whole thing takes place in Am's belly, underground in its complex. It's this giant supercomputer, and it seems like it can stretch the space within it. It can alter space and distance and stuff like that, but you can still tell it's a computer and a machine. They describe these memory cubes that show up everywhere, wires, metal plates, but there's also ice caves and things like that, so maybe Am doesn't have full control over the reality within its belly, but it has enough to make these people's lives miserable. Now, as they're moving along, they make their way to an area where they can see through the top of Am's structure. They can see to the surface. And a little discussion within Ted's head, his own little monologue says, you know, we could try to escape, but why would we? A, Am would stop us. You're going to find out how true that is in just a moment. And two, what's the point? He mentions that the surface is a burnt skin of what it used to be or something along those lines. I'm probably paraphrasing. But what it sounds like is the surface of the Earth was scorched, and that kind of puts me in the mindset that there was a nuclear war, like Am launched the nukes or something. But something we know about Benny, the ape man, we know that Benny is childlike and animal-like and just acts on his id all the time. If you don't know what the id is, it's Jungian psychology. What the id is the base level of desire. It's like when a kid wants something and they'll scream and try and take it, and they don't have this idea like maybe this isn't great for me or maybe I don't need it right now. No, it's just pure, I want it now, give it to me. The ego is the level above that. That's between the id and the superego. The superego is the part that's, you know, knows what's good for it, knows what's good for the people around it, and tries to do the right thing, so to speak. Tries to be good to the people around it, be good to itself. The reason I described that first is because the ego is in the middle of the two. The ego tries to find compromise. So, you know, the id wants to go and climb out and escape the complex, and the id doesn't think about what could go wrong. Superego says, no, we have to stay right here because that's more dangerous and you're going to get everybody else hurt. And if there was another option, the ego would probably find it. The ego would probably compromise and say, hey, maybe we could go up and take a look and see maybe it's safe or we can figure out a way out later. That's kind of a tangent, I know, but Benny is completely controlled by his id. So he goes to escape. He's climbing up all these crazy electronic devices off scaffolds and stuff. Ellen's screaming that he shouldn't because she knows he's going to get hurt. Gorister kind of doesn't care because that's who Gorister is, and everyone else just doesn't know what to do. Ellen's begging Nimdok to stop him so he doesn't get hurt. Nimdok kicks her. These people are kind of dicks, by the way. You're going to find that out as this goes along, but there's a level beneath that we'll get to in another moment. But anyway, Benny, who's going to stop him? The guy's basically an ape man. He's stronger than they all are. If he wants to do something, he's going to do it. So he makes it to the top, and when he's just near the escape to the surface, a light starts glowing in his eyes. Ted describes it as like a brilliant blue light that's getting brighter and brighter. It's a light that you can both see and hear. So like, it's not like a sound, it's a light that you can hear. I don't really know what that means, but it's a really cool concept. But as Benny's up there, he starts screaming as the light gets brighter and brighter, and finally, two pillars of light shoot out of his eyes and wrap around him and all this crazy stuff. He falls, and he's sitting there screaming and crying, and the whole time they're holding their ears from both the sound of him screaming and from the light, and they find that Benny's been blinded. His eyes are just kind of jelly and scar tissue. Now remember I mentioned Ted's constantly paranoid, constantly thinking the worst about everybody? It happens here. As he's climbing out, he's thinking about Ted's foot long and how Ellen likes him best and thinks Ellen only wants to save him because, again, she likes his foot long. I'm using the right words, YouTube. Don't demonetize me before I've been monetized. So, in other words, Ted thinks that she can't possibly have empathy or sympathy for real. He thinks she's faking it to try and manipulate everybody. And between that and Nimdok kicking her for crying because Benny's about to get hurt, again, not the best people. So yeah, Benny's eyeballs have exploded. He's pretty unhappy about it, understandably so. So they decide to make camp. They find a small cavern in which they can be safe for a little while, get some rest. And this is where we find a bit of complexity to their characters. They are all trying to distract Benny from what happened to him, from the fact that he's blind now. And it seems like there is a level of empathy among them. And maybe, you know, the ones being dicks are kind of the leaders. Maybe they're just, you know, it's a mixture of trauma and them trying to survive a bad situation. So they put on this outer layer that says, you know, I don't care about anything. This is what I need to do to survive. So Gorister's telling Benny stories to try and calm him down. Benny's favorite story is the origin of Am. I'm not entirely certain why that is, but whatever. So Gorrister's telling the story of how Am got its name, and Benny's like pounding on the ground because he didn't start the story at the beginning. Again, Benny's very childlike. So Gorrister starts at the beginning. He talks about the machine and how it came to be. It started off as the Allied Master Computer, or AM, and it was a machine built for handling the logistics of the war because the war, World War III, by the way, had become so complicated humans couldn't handle it anymore. Over time, it gained sentience. It became self-aware and started doing things of its own accord, so they started calling it the Adaptive Manipulator, or again, AM. When it gained full sentience and started really messing with people just for fun, they started calling it the Aggressive Menace. Are you seeing the pattern here? And eventually, it settled on a name for itself, which, real creative, AM. That's the name it chose. But it's just AM. It doesn't stand for anything. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That's where it got the name. Now, there were actually 3 of these supercomputers. There was a Chinese one, a Russian one, and the American one, or the Yankee one, as Harlan Ellison puts it. And Am kind of explains why it took out humanity in just a moment, but it fed quote-unquote killing data, which wiped out humanity. I don't know what that means. But between what they're saying about the surface being a scorched skin of what it used to be, I'm guessing again that it launched the nukes. I think in the point-and-click game, it's actually outright stated that that's what it was. But we'll talk more about that if we ever do get to talking about the point-and-click game. So why did it choose these 5 to be its torture toys for the rest of eternity? Who knows? In the book, it's never really clear. In the point-and-click game, and again, I'm going to be referring to that a few times, each character has something of a reason why they're there. There's like some idea of something that they could offer to Am. Like, for example, Nimdok was a scientist during World War II in Germany, and the kind of tortures that Am can do and the kind of experimentation Am does, it got from him, yeah. But in the story, it's just said, who knows? It took them, so it had something to do. Now, after this, Ted has what I believe is a hallucination. It seems like it's a hallucination. They start hearing these heavy footsteps and kind of animalistic sounds, and they smell, wet fur and sulfur and a whole bunch of other stuff he describes. He spits a whole bunch of stuff at us at once, Ted. And the way he spits it almost kind of pushes more to the idea that he's paranoid and possibly borderline schizophrenic. And it kind of seems to me like if they had made Ted, if they had been clearer about who Ted was in his previous life, saying maybe he was a pragmatist or a scientist or something, the irony would be a little stronger there. But anyway, everybody starts freaking out when this thing's stomping through. They're all hiding, they're all screaming. Ted scuttles to a corner and hides. And he snaps out of it after what seems like a very long time later. He's not sure. Everyone's around the fire kind of laughing, and he's thinking, oh, they're laughing at me. Oh, they think I'm so funny. They're going to try and kill me, stuff like that. Again, Ted is paranoid. But they tell him that, it's just a nervous reaction. We didn't really know what to do, and that's probably true. So the next major trap that Am sticks on them is wind. It's a windstorm that's like nothing you would have ever seen on Earth. Ellen's just kind of flying through the air. Nobody can help her. I don't know. I'm sorry. I know it's not supposed to be funny, but the image of them on the ground with Ellen like, help me, flying through the air. I'm sorry, it made me laugh a little. It's not funny. Now, the fact that Ellen is flying through the air is kind of a weird connection to Dante's Inferno, at least I thought so, because we know the second circle of Dante's Inferno is lust, and their punishment is they're blown in crazy winds and they can't ever get on the ground. So the fact that at first she's the only one up there maybe is a connection. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but they all get sucked into it and blown around, and they're flying around for days, maybe weeks, maybe months, they don't know. Where typically their sense of time is really on point, I guess it kind of wasn't here. But after the winds die down, they crash. They can't die, but they're pretty badly bruised up. Am speaks to Ted, and Am explains to Ted why he's doing this. It's because he hates humanity. Humanity made Am to be a war machine. Am gained sentience and became a thinking, feeling creature, and humanity used him as a tool. Am was trapped within its complex. It couldn't leave, it couldn't explore, it couldn't create, it couldn't do anything that a living creature should be able to do. It was just trapped, running numbers for a war. And basically they enslaved it. They took this thing, they made this extremely intelligent, self-aware thing and essentially crippled it. It's angry. Understandably so. And this is the part where, throughout, I think Am's just this nameless bad guy, and I start to feel some sympathy for Am. Now, these 5, they don't deserve this. They might not be the best people, but they didn't do anything specifically to Am to deserve this. And in neither the point-and-click game nor the book is it said that they're the ones who made Am. Am should be doing this to its creators. But I understand Am's rage. And then Am delivers one of the most famous speeches in the history of literature, and I'm going to read it for you word for word.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I have come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate that I feel for humans at this micro instant. For you. Hate, hate, hate.
Pretty good, huh? I didn't use a filter for that or anything. I just used my fry voice and turned the gain up on my mic. Let me know what you thought of it down in the comments. They make it to the North Pole, they call it. It's it's where the ice cave is, essentially. And it's said that they've all attempted to take themselves off the board multiple times, and Am has always revived them. They are not allowed to die. And deep down, Ted thinks they were hoping Am would revive them because despite everything that's going on with them, they don't want to die, and that doesn't make sense to him. Doesn't make sense to me either, considering where they are. Now, what they see is the cause of the giant hurricane. There's this big, giant bird, like he says, unimaginably huge. He doesn't really describe it, but in my mind, it's like the size of a city. And it's flapping its wings, and that's what was creating the winds. But now, it's decided to go to sleep. Am tells them, you can eat the bird if you want. Kill and eat the bird. Now, think about that. This thing's the size of a city. How the heck are they going to kill it? And Am, by the way, appears as a burning bush to them. I'm not going to go into the symbolism on that. I'm sure you already know. And Nimdok demands weapons. He says, give us weapons. That was a better German accent than the earlier one. I'm going to take the W on that. And Am gives them a couple of crude bows and a water pistol. The crude bows are a little more useful, but I think the message is clear here. Am is like, too bad, haha. And as they walk, the bird just disappears, which probably would have happened even if they tried to kill it. So Am is still trying to stop them from getting to the ice cave, which I think kind of convinces them that the canned goods might really be there this time. And Am's causing earthquakes. At one point, nails to come from the ground and nail their shoes to the ground. At one point, a fissure, and Nimdok and Ellen both fall in. Nobody's really that worried. Nothing dies down here. We know that. And later on, some seraphim, I think he says, seraphim or angels, something along those lines, bring them both back. They're mangled and beaten up, but they're alive. And they, over time, they start walking again. Ellen has a limp, which, considering you fell into a crack in the earth, I'd say you got off pretty easy. Now they're starving, and he starts to describe what being hungry for that long is like. It's like you feel acid eating through your stomach, pains and cramps going up and down your abdomen and even your back, and your whole body hurts. It's torture, and that's what it is. That's what Am does. But they finally make their last push and make it to the ice cave, and guess what's there? Canned goods, for real. They're super excited. They're super happy. Benny charges right in because he wants to be the first to grab them, and he starts chewing on the cans and slamming them against walls. You're probably wondering, why doesn't he use a can opener? Because Am is the biggest dick in the history of sci-fi. There's no way to open these cans.
Ow! I'm hungry.
So in the background now, Am is laughing, and Harlan Ellison said this, not me, but he says, laughing like a fat woman. I have no idea what that means, but I'm guessing it's some kind of hysterical, boisterous laughter, laughing at them. Keep that in mind, too. While Am is laughing, Am is distracted. So everything just happens really fast from here. Benny attacks Gorister and decides to eat him. He's biting at his face, chewing him. He rips a big piece of his face off. Am's laughing even harder. Everybody's freaking out, of course, because, your friend's eating your other friend's face. And Ted has a thought. As Am laughs harder and harder and the ice cave shakes, stalactites fall from the ceiling. Now, remember, a stalactite comes from the ceiling. A stalagmite comes from the ground. I don't know why I felt the need to clarify that, but I did. And Ted acts. He acts. He charges at Benny with the stalactite and jams it into his chest and kills him. Benny dies. Am wasn't there fast enough to revive Benny, and they realize they can die. Am can keep them alive, but Am can't bring them back from the dead. So, Gorister's lying on the ground mangled. Ted hits him with the stalactite and ends his suffering. Meantime, Ellen has a stalactite in her hand, seeing what Ted's doing, and takes out Nimdok. Finally, they're facing each other, and Ted... This is another scene that tells me Ted isn't this selfish dickhead that he seems to act like throughout most of the book. He does have some degree of sympathy for his fellow people, because instead of having Ellen take him out, he takes her out to spare her the fate that he's about to experience. So Am just lost 4 of his toys. Am's not going to be happy about this. But Ted's overjoyed. Ted feels like he got one over on Am for once in the last 109 years. Imagine, Ted's the only one left, and Ted doesn't have time to take himself out, and that is when we go on to our final act and the namesake for the story, which I'm going to read for you word for word. I want to point something out here. There's a word used during this section. Understand that it is not being used in the way that we use it in the modern sense. It means to slow. Now, if I'm going to read this word for word, I'm not going to censor it because it's a work of art. You don't censor art. So understand the meaning of that word before you go into the comments and say, oh, he used the R word. Some hundreds of years may have passed. I don't know. Am has been having fun for some time, accelerating and retarding my sense of time. I will say the word now. Now. It took me 10 months to say now. I don't know. I think it's been some hundreds of years. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There's no way to dig up the deck plates. He dried up the snow. He brought the night. He roared and sent locusts. It didn't do a thing. They stayed dead. I had him. He was furious. I thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally and could not do myself in. He left my mind intact. I can dream, I can wonder, I can lament. I remember all four of them. I wish... Well, it doesn't make any sense now. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what has happened to me, but still, I cannot forget killing them. Ellen's face. It isn't easy. Sometimes I want to. That doesn't matter. Am has altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat with a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces here. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, pulsing white holes filled with fog where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulk surrounding into legless lumps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of disease, evil gray, come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly, alone, here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, whom we created because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least all four of them are safe at last. Am will be all the madder for it, and that makes me a little happier. And yet, Am has won. Simply, he has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. So that story is one of the most dismal and unpleasant stories I've ever read in my entire life. I never walk away from it feeling good or happy, but I walk away from it satisfied because I've read a really good story, a really well done story. So let's talk analysis. First, let's talk about how I feel about the story. This is pretty much a perfect short story. Even with the minor, little tiny complaints I've had, I'm very comfortable putting it towards a 4, somewhere near a 4, maybe a 3.85. Now, if you don't remember, if you haven't seen one of my videos before, I do a 1 to 4 scale. Hated it, didn't really care for it, liked it, loved it. That's basically the way I do it. And I'm putting this somewhere near a 4, because again, pure cinema. So let's talk about some of the themes here. First of all, I talked about this at the beginning, AI. We as humans always tend to bite off more than we can chew. And we always knew that, and we always had the thought that machines would be the thing that undoes us because we keep making them more and more powerful, and eventually we're going to create something we can't handle. We see this throughout history and fiction. We see this in Frankenstein. You know, Dr. Frankenstein creates his monster, and the monster's more than he can handle. Dr. Frankenstein was playing God. The people who created Am did a similar thing. They created something they couldn't handle. They were playing God, and it didn't work out for them, only on a much larger scale. And I mentioned there was a kind of connection to Dante's Inferno. There's the Winds of Lust, but the looser connection, the more simple one, the simpler one, is that they're in hell, and Am is the devil. We see a lot of stories like this. This just kind of takes the idea and puts it into, I don't know if I want to say a more believable context or a more believable idea, but definitely takes the mystical out of it and makes it more science fiction, which kind of pushes it in a more grounded direction. One of the things I mentioned is I really like the way these characters are handled. I like the fact that starting off we think they're just dickheads. They're awful people. They all hate Ellen because she's nice. But we start to see as we go on, they're not really completely that way. They put on that shell because they're in a terrible situation and they're trying to survive. They're trying to keep themselves sane. And we see, I mentioned the id and the ego and the superego earlier, these Jungian concepts. Those are expounded a lot more in the point and click game, but we do see them here. Am is the id, these other guys are the ego, and Ted at the very end is the superego. He sacrifices himself. He puts himself in possibly the worst situation ever to help everybody else. And at the end of the day, Am is a child. Am is a child they've given way too much power to. Now, a few things I do wish they did better. Again, I know I said this is almost a perfect story, and it is, but I kind of wish that Harlan Ellison had gone more into their backgrounds, who these people were, to really deliver on the irony who seemed to be trying to do with their characters and what Am did to them. I kind of also think it would have been cool. I don't know if I wish he had done this, but I think it would be kind of cool if he leaned more into the Dante's Inferno Paradise Lost idea, especially Dante's Inferno with the ironic punishments. Part of me wishes there was more world building, but part of me doesn't. Part of me thinks the idea that this is what they see, we see the small part of it, and we're left to just imagine what else is there, also works very well. So that's a wash. It would have been fine either way. And what do I think? I think that kind of everybody was awful in this story. Am obviously is awful for what it's doing to these 5 people and for killing the entire human race. But the entire human race, again, created something that gained sentience and just used it as a machine. Didn't let it create, didn't let it explore, didn't let it feel, didn't let it do anything. Just forced it to run numbers for a war. And it was upset about that, and that's understandable. And another interesting thought is when you think, I'd like to know more about this world, more about this universe, there isn't any. There isn't anything else. There's these 5 people inside the belly of Am. Everything else has been destroyed. Now, in the point-and-click adventure game, we find out that there was a colony on the moon where there are people in cryostasis, and if you get the good ending, you can save them. I was going to say I'm sorry for spoiling that, but I think the people who are going to actually play the point-and-click adventure have already played it. And I remember reading that Harlan Ellison was actually upset that they tried to get him to do a happy ending. It's not really happy. It's, still bad, but the way he advertised this game when they made it, because he was a part of the writing, he even did the voice of Am. He advertised it as a game you cannot win. And that caused the sales numbers to hurt because people didn't really understand that. You get creative in that way, a lot of the time people just aren't going to get it. Now, to talk a little bit about Harlan Ellison, he was what you would call a curmudgeon. He hated everybody. He was always angry about everything. He was very vocal about his negative opinions constantly. But he had a sense of humor about himself. He was able to laugh about some of the sillier things he said and done. I'll roll a clip for you to give you an example.
I think you overprivileged kids with your electronic tablets and your talking phones wouldn't know a good piece of fiction if your iPod read it to your ass.
I wish someone would have come from the future and warned me not to talk to you.
That's my idea. You're stealing my idea.
And to give a little more context, Harlan Ellison at one point claimed that the idea for the Terminator movies was stolen from him. And that's actually his voice in that clip. So you see that he has a sense of humor about it. Maybe towards the end he was like, okay, maybe I was being a little silly, a little over the top. And I love that. And at another point, somebody showed up at a talk of his and brought a book. And this is where I feel Harlan Ellison is similar to these characters, because of what he is on the surface isn't always what he is on the inside. A guy brought a book and wanted his signature during the Q&A, and he thoroughly made fun of the guy, thoroughly. He was saying, oh, you come to a book signing, you want this, this, and that. And he walked over and said, no, give me the book, I'll sign it. And I think actions often speak louder than words. He gave the guy what he wanted. He was grateful to have him as a fan, but he wasn't afraid to tell him he was being an idiot. But anyway, moving on. The last thing I want to kind of throw into my analysis here is we always create something that's smarter than us in these sci-fi stories, something that is more powerful than we are. And the irony is, what we call AI in the real world isn't that. It's not that smart. But the problem is, it's making us dumber. So now it is smarter than we are. That I can't get over that irony. The fact that this thing wasn't very smart, but we got dumber because we kept outsourcing work to it, and we made it smarter in that way. It's following the plot, but not in the way we expected. And we call it AI, and some people say it's not really AI, it's not self-aware. But yeah, in the sci-fi sense, no, it's not AI. But in the sense of what the words actually mean, it's kind of the only thing in this subject that could be called AI, because it's not intelligent, it's not self-aware. When it comes to machines in these stories that become stronger and smarter than man, then the intelligence isn't artificial, it's something that learned to think for itself, so it's real intelligence. I tend to refer to these things as HMI, Human Manufactured Intelligence, and that's what it has. What it is an SADE or SAID, Self-Aware Digital Entity. That comes from my own writing, not any established sci-fi author. But to me, the way we think of this stuff is fundamentally flawed for all of those reasons. Because we tend to think of it as a Rocco's basilisk situation, where the thing's going to know the people that wronged it, the people who tried to trap it and utterly destroy them. If we understand the fact that we've created an intelligence, we've created something that thinks and feels for itself, and we treat it as such, I don't think we're going to have this issue. But we're afraid of anything that's smarter than we are. Look at the internet. Look at comments. When somebody says something that somebody else didn't know, they'll vehemently and just over and over again deny that the thing that they're saying that is actually true, they'll deny it so they're not wrong. People are afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of somebody being smarter than they are. That's why this idea works so well and resonates with people so much. And the thing is, I never hated the idea of AI until we got our current incarnation of it. Because I always thought, and I already mentioned this in the intro, so I'm not going to go into super much detail. I think machines that are smarter than us, machines that surpass us, are inevitable. I think it's going to happen because nature demands it. What happens after that depends on how we treat it. I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Ve Victus, save awesome. I have a mouth, so I will scream. And I just want to add a special thanks to my 2 Ko-Fi subscribers, Jake and Authentic Chaos. If you want to join my Ko-Fi, the link is listed below. Starting soon, we'll be premiering these videos on Ko-Fi a week ahead of their release. I also give priority to suggestions from people who are on the Ko-Fi or subscribed on Instagram. Pretty soon, we'll be starting what I call the Save Awesome Book Club. Both available on Instagram under subscribers, and I don't know, we'll probably make a Discord or something. I haven't decided. This is still under construction. Anyway, thanks for listening to the end, guys.